Welcome to NJBIA is Minding Your Business. I'm your host, Bob Considine. Well, family law can be a critical area for folks both inside and outside the business world. Here to discuss the latest family law trends and their own business are leading New Jersey family law attorneys Rosanne DeTorres and Erin DeGeorge from the aptly named firm of DeTorres and DeGeorge. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so listen, 10 years for your firm.
That's right.
How did this start? How did you get here in 10 years, and what's changed? It's a leading question.
It's like a marriage. We formed the firm on April 1st, April Fool's Day of 2011.
Wow.
I met Erin through another attorney, and she was leaving a big firm and was doing a little bit of per diem work for me, and I saw her work ethic and how she treated the clients and how brilliant she was, and I'd been working on my own for many years.
Right.
As a solo, and I thought, wow, we could really make this work and build something together, and that's what happened.
Right. And Erin, this is a big step for you at that point, right? I mean,
it was a huge step. I mean, I felt like I was jumping off a cliff, and, but I just, there was something, it was in my gut. I knew it was going to work, and I just felt very comfortable with Rosanne from the beginning. Like she said, our work ethics aligned.
That's great.
So that was really what it came down to.
So when you talk about what you guys do, family law, it's divorce, it's child support, it's custody stuff. These are pretty weighty areas. So how do you engage with a client who comes to you? Do you have to be the strong, steady type, and obviously what's an emotional time, or is it case-by-case basis?
For me, it's definitely case by case. Everybody communicates differently, and what I've learned in 32 years of practice is that not everybody communicates the same. So I need to understand how to resonate with my client, how to identify with them, how to communicate the way they want to be communicated with. For example, if you're an engineer and you come in with a spreadsheet with all your assets and liabilities, I know you're one kind of a person.
Right.
If you come in and tell me about the horror of your marriage and who did what to who, then I know you're a different kind of a person. So it really just depends.
Is it a challenge sometimes? Again, I mentioned is often an emotional time. And when there's families involved and children involved and separation of parents, do you have to sometimes take those clients right off the bat and say, hey, kids first?
Oh, definitely. We absolutely talk about that and how important it is to put the children first, because the court is going to do that.
Right.
It's always going to be what is in the child's best interest, not what is in the parent's best interest.
Right.
Because many times that is the first, something that we hear, well, I don't want that. But really what is best for the child, and that's what we have to address.
And sensitivities, I would imagine, are always elevated when they first come to you guys.
It's true. Divorce it's like a death. It can be.
Yeah.
Many people come to that place and see it as a business transaction, which truly it is in many ways, putting aside custody and parenting issues. But for a lot of people, it's a difficult transition. There's a lot of fear and trepidation associated with what is my life going to look like in the future? How am I going to unravel all these details? But that's what we're here for.
That's what you're there.
Yeah.
And also, there are times people come to meet with us and they just want information. They want to be educated so that it can help with their decision-making process.
Right.
And then we might not hear from them for a year.
Yeah.
So it's really, I always tell people, we're going to be here no matter what. You have to now take the time to make a decision, because some people come, they're ready. They wanted to be divorced yesterday, but then there are people who they really want to be educated first before they make such a big decision.
That's a good point.
Right. How about in terms, let's just go back a year and a half with the pandemic. How did that impact family law in terms of cases? I mean, where things slowed down in the court case? In cases?
Yeah, the court had a difficult time pivoting to a virtual environment. In the family law court in the state of New Jersey, there was no such thing as electronic filing, where when we communicated with the court, everything had to be hand delivered.
Right.
Once in a while, you could get permission to fax something to the court. They had no means to absorb filing by an electronic means. And so they had to develop that. So everything came to a screeching halt, to be honest with you. And then the phone stopped ringing. People were unsure. I, for one, thought when Murphy said we were going to shut down 2 weeks, I'll be working from home for 2 weeks. I thought we were going to, it would be fun, a novel thing to do. I had my little office in my house, and then it just kept going on, and it was very quiet for about 2 months. And then it was the floodgates opened. And by the time summer came, June, July, we've never been busier.
Wow. Was that a result of folks being together longer?
Oh, definitely.
In one space?
So. Without a doubt, because you have to remember, a lot of times in New Jersey, people, well, they do pharmaceuticals or whatever, type of job they have, there's a lot of times the spouse travels, right? So you have spouses who they live,
right.
They're away for the entire week, and now they're home 24/7. So it was very difficult for people who were used to a spouse traveling.
But also with the kids being home. Now try to imagine two parents that, let's say, both work outside the home. Now they're both working inside the home, and they're trying to get their kids to do school on the computer at the dining room table. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. How about folks who've already been divorced, but they have, I guess, what they're called parenting agreements? I would imagine that situation is even harder to remediate those.
Yeah, it became difficult because you had issues with, should the child go to the other spouse, to the father's house or mother's house because they're a healthcare worker, they're exposed to COVID. Yeah. There was a lot of those issues. Traveling issues, should the child travel to a state because then when they come back they have to quarantine. There was a host of issues, and then it progressed to the stimulus funds. And how are the stimulus funds going to be divided? Who gets them? So there were, and now we're dealing with the child tax care credit, right? Because that comes in, and because it was based on the prior year's tax return, it became an issue. So we're still dealing with those types of issues.
And you mentioned, Rosanna, just a few minutes ago, how the paperwork you couldn't electronically file. Once cases started moving, were they done remotely? Were judges being seen remotely?
Yeah,
and how is that different from I figured a judge wants to get a sense of the person and be in the same room with them.
It cuts both ways, so you're exactly right. I think, from a judge's perspective, I'm not a judge, but I imagine it's difficult to evaluate demeanor during a hearing where there's where there's testimony.
Right.
It's much easier when you're in the room. You can see body language, you can watch their eyes. It's difficult when you're on the Zoom video conference because there's a lot of distractions and people just aren't really paying attention, including, I think, the judge. But I've tried since COVID, domestic violence cases virtually. I'm in the midst of a trial right now that has primarily been conducted virtually, days and days of trial testimony. Now, though, some judges, and it depends on who they are and what jurisdiction, they're asking us to come in and present the case. The great thing about the virtual court, though, is they give you a time to show up, and you show up. It saves so much money for the client.
Okay, that's interesting.
Before COVID, we would have motion hearings in, let's say, Somerset or Hunterdon County are on Fridays. Everybody that has a motion on that day comes at 8:30 or 9 o'clock on Friday, and you may wait all day to be heard for 30 minutes, and you just sit there. You can try to work on other cases. You chit-chat with your client. They're paying you to sit there. When virtual court started, they'd say, you log in at 10, you log in at 10:30, you log in at 11, and the client only paid for the time that you were on the Zoom. So it was much more efficient. It was certainly more efficient from the lawyer's point of view because we could get so much more done working on other cases. We weren't just standing around. Now we're going to go back to live court. I don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to stagger us or if they're just going to do what we call the cattle call again, where everybody shows up in the morning and you just wait around until you're called. It's not a good way to proceed.
And also, clients don't have to take a day off from work, right? Maybe they take their lunch hour at 10 o'clock in the morning.
True.
So it really cut down, I think, on people having to take time off, especially if you're unpaid.
Maybe this is a rookie legal question, but is it possible that through a remote hearing that the judge is solely looking at the evidence more than he would if people were in the room?
That's a good question.
Because there's nothing else to gauge by except...
it's a really good question. I think it's hard to evaluate demeanor. It's not impossible. Because you're cross-examining witnesses and you're presenting evidence, and that is evidence. What they're testifying to is evidence, and the way that you answer a question is evidentiary. You could be very evasive in answering a question, and whether I can see your facial expression or not, I think the court can understand whether you're being evasive or not, and undermining your credibility.
And also, who's in the room with the person testifying? We've had that issue.
Not supposed to have anybody in the room.
Right, because when you're in the courthouse, in the courtroom, It's just the litigant is the witness is on the stand testifying, and they don't have any assistance from anybody else. If you're in a virtual setting, they're in a room, who's off camera?
I had a situation where the witness was on the phone with another attorney that was coaching her during my cross-examination, and we discovered it later.
Wow.
With the phone records.
So what happened post?
She lost the case because when we questioned her about it, her being on the phone, she lied and said she wasn't, but we had the phone records, and so the judge dismissed her complaint.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
We're part of it, this incredibly busy time. Was some of it cases you were getting child support and alimony related from the standpoint of people all of a sudden they wouldn't be able to work?
Yeah.
Can say, hey, I can't pay this anymore. Was that part of the deal?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But in the state of New Jersey, you can't file something for a reduction like that because of loss of employment for 90 days.
Right.
So people did have to wait, and then you have to show what you're doing in order to
replicate your income.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to show your job search efforts, but you have to survive those 90 days. And then let's say you file your application on the 91st day, you're still waiting several months possibly before a court intervenes.
Right.
And if you hit a home run on something like that, what you get is a trial,
right,
where you have to prove your financial situation. So it could be devastating to people.
Let's pivot a little off COVID right now. Sort of. How are things permanently going to change as a result of we've had this 12 to 18 month span where things did change? What procedures are going to be different going forward?
Well, the court right now is still having motions virtual, case management conferences virtual, and early settlement panels virtual. So for that, for this foreseeable future is not going to change. The only thing that they are saying now is that if there's a trial and the judge wants you in, you have to be in.
Okay. Yeah, the trials are going to be live. But in terms of business operations, we have clients now that most people are now very comfortable with the remote way of conducting business. Right. So when I say, do you want to meet? They assume, we're going to talk on the phone or we're going to have a video conference.
Right.
That very few people are asking to come in, even though we, at this point, would allow people to come in. There was many, for that year and a half or so, we weren't allowing anybody to come into the office, except our staff.
Right. Well, 10 years on, D&D, we'll call you D&D. You obviously deal with some very weighty issues that pull at your heartstrings. There was a sign I noticed on one of the photographs of your company, and it read, "Not to spoil the ending for you, but everything's going to be okay."
Now, I have to tell a funny story about that. Okay. I bought that because I grew up on Long Island, and I saw it in a gift shop. Right. And I brought it in, and when we moved, Rosanne wanted to get rid of it. And everybody loves that sign.
Right. Well, is that kind of what I was getting at? Is that kind of your mission? Is that, obviously you want to represent your client best, but as I said, it's not easy for anybody who gets involved in these cases. So.
No,
I'll let her answer that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it is going to be okay. And I always tell clients that it's going to feel like you're in mud, and you're stuck, and you're not getting anywhere, and this is taking forever. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it is going to be okay. Right. And we help guide you to that end. And by listening to the client, what is it that they want? So often, and I hate to be stereotypical, but many times women are never asked what they want. They don't even know what they want. Right. So it's really the first time they're having to kind of think about those things. And, but it is going to be okay. It really is.
My dad used to say to me, I don't think he really understood what I did every day, but he would say, did you win in court today? And I said, Dad, nobody wins in divorce, everybody loses something. Right. And the best resolution is where everybody sort of leaves the process equally unhappy. Right. There's no easy way out of a divorce. The best you can say is that you're willing to live, that you've made some compromises, they've made some compromises, and you're willing to live with the outcome without having a trial. Right.
Because it's always better to be part of the decision-making process rather than have a judge who just met your family, right? Yeah. Make decisions about your child and your finances.
Well, good thoughts indeed. And we encourage people to go to D&D Family Law to learn more about Rosanne DeTorres and Erin DeGeorge and their great family law firm. They never lose their appeal. How about that?
I like
I like
that.
Thank you both for being here.
Thanks,
Our
Bob.
pleasure. Thank
All
you.
right, and we'll be back right after this.